Students committed to learning can find many possible paths to success. There's not, a particular, if you follow these rules, boom, there it is. Each of you are different. Each class you're taking is going to be a little different, and so you'll have to continually kind of adjust your mode of operation. But I think there are some things that, in general, can be helpful. So continually assess your academic progress and adjust to whatever the situation is. I mentioned there's really no magic formula, but the goal, I think, for all of us should be retention of knowledge, not just getting a good grade. Obviously, we want to get a good grade, but especially for your pre-med and some of the others, you're going to be taking some tests later on, like the MCAT, and you're going to want to be able to recall the things that you've learned. It's not just learn it for the test and forget it. You want to get in the mode of, when you go to medical school or physical therapy school or pharmacy school, those are things you're going to have to remember. So start putting into practice now the types of learning strategies that will help you get into that habit of learning for retention. All right, let's just start out with some tips for class, some classroom strategies. And then we'll have study strategies, classroom strategies, just some general habit types of strategies. So these all fall kind of under classroom strategies. The first is one that perhaps you've heard: sit near the front of the class. And while that's a general good rule in principle, it's not always the best rule. I know a lot of our athletes are required to sit at the front of the class, but in a class that's wide, and they're sitting at the front, it's sometimes difficult to see the board because of the weird angle that you're at. So it might be the second or even third row is a better seat than the front row over in the corner somewhere. So you want to sit in a place that you can have easy viewing access to the instructor and the material, the board, the screen, whatever. And also a place that isn't going to be distracting, have other things that will distract you. And some people are distracted more easily than others by certain things. Record everything your instructor writes. Be sure to write down worked examples, step by step. These are often the basis of test questions. When I'm teaching chemistry, the types of problems that we go over in class, you're going to see in homework, you're going to see on the test. We really don't try and trick anybody. So be sure that you take good notes and neat notes. We'll talk a little bit more about neatness in a minute. Attend class. That may seem obvious, but students don't always do that. Things come up. Make it a priority. There are things that come up that you have to miss class for, but sometimes even those, with careful scheduling and planning, you can work around. When do you make your dental appointment? You have some options there. It doesn't always have to be during a class time. There's often content that may be presented to you for the first and possibly only time in class, and so if you're not there for class, you may never know what you missed until the exam. So obviously show up. Pay attention to lectures, demonstrations, if there are group questions, clicker questions, or something like that in the class. Just stay engaged in the class. And if you do miss a class, be sure to get the notes as soon as possible and review those, whether it's from another classmate or the instructor. Read before, let's see where we at. Oh yeah, okay. Remove distractions. We've got a few distractions on the bottom here. Facebook during class, just staring out the window, daydreaming. I don't know exactly what else she's got in her mind there. Texting. Even people can be distracting. You know who those people are. If you sit next to them and they're going to talk in your ear the whole time, avoid those people. You're here for a purpose. You're in a class for a purpose. So whatever distractions there might be in a class, try to eliminate those. Maybe it's not best for you to sit next to the window where there are geese walking by and squirrels in the trees, and just pay attention to those kinds of things. Let's see. And then mentally engage, that's something that is something you try to do intentionally. Pay attention to lectures, try and keep your focus. Okay, go on to the next one. read before and after the class. Keep up on reading. You pay a lot of money for these textbooks, right? Make use of them. And you know, it may not always be true in all the classes that you'll take at college that the instructor uses the textbook, but I think in the sciences and math particularly, those textbooks are chosen with intentionality. We review the texts, we update them, we change them, and they're used extensively. So be sure that you're using those. Reviewing your lecture notes, it's something simple. It won't take a lot of time, but review lecture notes before and after a class. It just helps ingrain them, pour over them, you know, one more time. And this one is often one that students, especially early students, freshmen, don't do a lot of. Communicate with your instructor. Your instructors don't bite, usually. But get to know them. Don't only come to them, you know, in an emergency or if you really have to. They all have office hours. They're there for a reason. They don't like sitting in their office twiddling their thumbs waiting for students. I mean, there's other things they do too. But take advantage of those opportunities to get to know your instructors. Building those relationships will help in the class. Instructors get to know you. But we don't always know why a student is missing class. We can't, we're not mind readers. So communicate with your instructor. If you're struggling, again, we're not mind readers. We don't know what the issues are. Be sure to communicate with your instructors. Yeah. All right, just some general study strategies. This would be the stuff that occurs outside of the classroom. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Math and science subjects are subjects that you think about by doing. There's a lot of repetition, so embrace repetition. That's the way you get to know the material. You get used to understanding how to solve problems in whatever science class it is. Watching someone else work a problem is never enough. You have to go through the process yourself. Even in a study group, watching your study partner do the problem. Well, that's nice, but it's not going to help you. You need to go through the process of engaging material and solving the problem. So embrace repetition. If your instructor expects you to solve 10 problems, consider that your minimum. You know, do twice as many of those. Maybe go through and solve each problem twice. The extra effort is the difference between testing your luck and being a good student. So time management. Yeah, stay right there for a minute. Make time to study. It's amazing to me how busy students are juggling all the things that they're doing, from musicals to being in sports to working 20 hours a week to all this stuff. That's just overwhelming to me. It makes my head spin. So maybe we get overcommitted sometimes. It's okay to not be involved in everything. This is a lesson I had to learn. That's what I'm trying to teach my daughter Caitlin, even though she's a senior here. We get overworked. So carve out the time to study. Plan the time, set it aside. Choose your study environment well. I can study with music on, but it has to be a particular kind of music. It can't be music with words. It has to be something with no words, and preferably music that I don't know the tune and the words to, because that'll start occupying my mind rather than what I'm trying to focus on. Maybe silence is the best way for you to study. You know yourself. Try to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to distract you from concentrating on the material. So avoid TV, some music, internet, people, texting. Social media is always in front of our face. We've always got Facebook up on the computer while we're studying, right? You hear the ding, so you look over and that, you can kill 3/4 of the time that you've set aside to study just by replying to those little things on Facebook or a text message or whatever. So, maybe for this hour that you're to be studying, that you've set aside the day, you turn all that off. Just focus on studying. Some of the recommendations I was reading about in preparing for this, instructors actually passed out earplugs to students so they could put them in their ears so that distractions in the hallway, noises and things won't distract them. I thought that was an interesting idea. I hadn't done that, but might not be a bad idea. Maybe you need to avoid some certain people. Maybe you actually have to find a hiding place to get away so the people aren't distracting you. Don't pick a place that's too comfortable. Don't study in bed. Well, it's so comfortable there though. Yeah, I know, that's the problem. It's too comfortable. A hard seat, something that'll help keep you awake. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Understand the problem. Whether this is a science problem, a mathematics problem, read the problem carefully. As students come to me with needing help, I often find that they don't even understand the problem. So read the problem carefully and know what's being asked. Read the last sentence of the problem one more time, just to ensure that you know where you're headed. Devise a plan, think about similar problems you've worked in the past, and then carry out the plan. Your work should be neat and accurate. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But then at the end, once you've got your answer, see if it makes sense. Sometimes if you've made an error, the answer is just so ridiculous, there's no way it could be right. So see if the answer is reasonable. Review textbook material that relates to homework. Move on to the next slide there. Again, use the textbook. One good strategy is if you've got chapter questions at the end of the chapter. The chapter is usually divided up into pieces, section 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and the homework at the end of the chapter is often divided up that way as well. So after you've read 3.1, go and do the homework for that section, 3.1. Then go back and read 3.2, and then do the homework set that is 3.2, so that you're breaking it up into pieces, manageable pieces, and typically they're not going to ask you something that's from a later section in that piece of the homework. I know that's true with chemistry and some of the others. So that's often a way that if you read all of it and then you can't remember exactly where something was, you end up flipping through the chapter trying to find examples for that particular question. Okay, do your homework as neatly as possible. This is for a variety of reasons. Your instructor can easily find mistakes and assist you. If it's messy, it's time consuming to try and piece together what exactly you've done. You can easily go back and track your own steps. So write down every step of the problem. That helps in memorizing the process and understanding the material, and it certainly helps your instructor. Helps you organize your thoughts. It's also beneficial in group work. If you get a study group together, which I highly recommend, as you explain problems to other people, that helps ingrain it in your own memory. The best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. And that's a great advantage of helping out the ACE Lab as well. As you continue to teach that material, it's becoming more and more a part of you. And your understanding just improves. Understand the reasons for each problem and check your answers. So the next one. If you don't understand a problem, you're stuck. What do you do? Well, review the textbook. Look at the section that that material comes from. Review lecture notes. And again, the more complete your notes are, the better that will be. Review similar problems. Often your textbooks have answers to every other problem. The answers to the odds are in the back, and your instructor's assigned evens or something like that. If you can't figure out number 22, look at number 21 and see what the answer is, and see if you can put it together that way. And call a friend in the class. If you're totally stuck and don't know, you've spent a lot of time on it, put it away for a while. Skip that problem, come back to it later, or contact your instructor or tutor as soon as possible to try and understand it. But put your effort in first. All right. Make up a note card. Note cards are valuable. It's kind of old school. It involves no technology at all, but it's very effective. There's a lot of vocabulary, if it's organic chemistry, memorizing, structures, whatever. Note cards they're portable. They can fit in your pocket. Rubber band them together. You can keep them with you. There's a lot of time that we waste throughout the day when we're waiting in line, when we're commercial on TV, whatever. Riding in a car, someone else is driving. Pull those things out and start use that time that otherwise might be wasted. In vocabulary, I mentioned that vocabulary is really key, especially in science classes. Look for patterns and roots in words. Never underestimate the value of any vocabulary term. If you can speak the language, it's going to make a huge difference in the course. In each science course, you're progress, there's going to be a lot of new language. We can get frustrated and say, well, why can't you just speak in English terms and not use all these fancy words? Well, those words are the language of that particular discipline, and if you're going to be successful in it, you need to learn the vocabulary. So create and review note cards. That summarizes information in small, manageable amounts. They're valuable when reviewing notes. You can test yourself in terms of definitions. In a study group, you can quiz each other using the cards. So keep a bunch handy for a quick 15-minute review. All right, for preparing for exams, ask about the test. Get a little information ahead of time. What's the format going to be? Make sure you know what chapters it's going to cover. Work as many problems as you can before the test. Study from your outline, your notes, obviously your textbook. Get information from as many of those different sources as you can. And then aim for the perfect score. You may not get a perfect score, but if you aim for it, you'll get a lot closer to it. If there's any piece that you're not sure about, be sure you focus on those pieces before the test and get help. Form a study group. In forming a study group, don't just randomly pick some people from your class. Choose carefully, because not everybody is going to be helpful in a study group. Study group can get together to discuss lecture notes, work on problems together, and that's really valuable. But be sure that you're working on the problems together and not just letting the person who knows or thinks they know how to do the problem do it and everybody else just copy down what they do. Be sure that you're working and engaging together and everyone's working to solve the problem. They're always good for moral support. Quiz each other. Explaining problems verbally to each other is a great help. Just saying words in your mind is good, but if you can actually verbalize them, that's going to help even more. Your ability to use full sentences to explain problems and describe solutions will improve your understanding and increase your learning pace overall. Some other math and science resources. Again, I mentioned office hours of the instructor. Don't ignore those. There is the ACE lab. Sometimes the instructor may have a review session. If they do that, definitely go. They're going to be talking about exactly what you're going to need to know on the test. It'd be crazy not to go. And then there's often supplemental materials are available. You can go on the internet and find often demonstrations on YouTube or whatever of how to solve a particular problem. There's so much out there that's available now. So take advantage of some of that. All right, let's move on to some lifestyle strategies. Just some general tips to help us stay sharp and humming at our peak. Move on to the next slide there. We can get involved in studying, and there's a point where you really can't do much more. You get just mentally tired. Maybe you've got a couple hours set aside to study. Don't study for a solid 2 hours. Maybe a half hour and then take a 5-minute walk. Take a break. Do something you enjoy for a few minutes and then come back to it. Get up, walk around, drink some coffee or whatever your favorite beverage is. And then, I mean, that's good for, in the context of a long study session, but even beyond that, take some time, be sure that you've got some time to wind down on a weekend or in an evening. Create some Sabbath time for yourself. Take some time to rest. This is really important. This is one that I can't emphasize enough, and that most students ignore more than any of the other advice. Sleep is really important for us for a variety of reasons, health, but mentally it's incredibly important as well. And regularity is a key. Consistent sleep, not sleeping 2 hours this night and then sleeping 12 hours the next night and then 3 hours this night. And then try and set yourself up in a regular schedule. And I know, maybe 3 in the morning is the only time the guys get together to play video games, but try to avoid that. The average student is functioning with a clinical sleep disorder, says Leanne Hamilton. She's Assistant Director of Health Promotion and Preventative Services at the University of Arizona, and I think this research applies to any campus. Her research found that students on average get 6.5 hours of sleep per night. How much you guys get per night on average? What would you say?
7.
About that? 7? 5? 5's not enough. 7's getting closer. 8 would be better. Her researchers also found that sleep time and quality measurements declined over the course of the academic year. You get less sleep as the semester continues, while anxiety, depression, and conflict with family, friends, and roommates all rose throughout the semester. So in response, some counselors and health officials were trying to get the message out in creative ways. A small college in Nebraska had student peer educators plop down a bed in the middle of the student union and dress themselves in pajamas and talk to passerbyers about sleep. Humorous, if anything else, but so far the reaction was positive. Students readily take napping classes. Maybe we should add that to our... I'd like to teach that one, actually. Yeah. And pass out earplugs. But there's been a lot of research in this area, and a nap, the power of a nap is amazing, even a 15-minute nap. That can really aid a lot. Cornell professor James Mass, a leading researcher in this relationship between sleep and performance, in their school, they actually got the school to move the starting time for classes from 7:55 to 8:30 a.m. And we got the sports folks to cut practices and homework expectations 10% each. Then you think, well, if they're not doing that much homework, that's going to decrease their performance. Actually, it increased the performance. 20% fewer students visited the health center. 17% more students took time for a hot breakfast, and there was a record increase in GPA just by sending students to dorms earlier and getting them to sleep a little bit more. On many college campuses, the biggest obstacle is a deep-rooted culture of sleep deprivation machismo. For both the cool kids and the smart kids, it seems the thing to brag about is how little sleep you got. You bragged about that. Kids in the coffee line will brag, I got 2 hours of sleep last night, like it's a competition or something. Well, I only got 1. I'm not sure that's exactly what we want to brag about. So get your sleep. Eating well. We think about the benefits on the body for eating well, but there are also benefits on your brain for eating well. There's a lot, just do a Google search on exercise for your brain on the internet, and it's amazing how much research will come up. Oxygen level is low. When oxygen level in your brain is low, you lose the ability to concentrate. And if you can't concentrate, you can't learn new information. So physical exercise, physical exercise is increases the flow of blood and oxygen to your brain, allowing you to think better. There's been a lot of research in this area in the last 10 years as well. A 3-month program of vigorous aerobic exercise seemed to produce new neurons in this area, as well as improvements on tests of mental recall. So it results in improved memory, better concentration. And this isn't like you have to exercise 5 hours a day or anything. This is, take a half-hour walk. Spend a little bit of time on the treadmill or walking around the lake or swimming or whatever. Sharper thinking ability, longer life, increased resistance to disease. You can see a lot of the other benefits that are there. But many of them are related to mental ability, better concentration, sharper thinking. And better sleep, which is what we talked about just a moment ago. And then the last thing I wanted to just mention is, of course, to not neglect the spiritual disciplines. Anxiety is one thing that will keep you from doing well and retaining information. And there have been a lot of studies. Dr. Stogner, in fact, and some of the psychology folks are doing some research on the effects of prayer and meditation. And we don't do those things just so we're healthy, but don't forget to rely on our Creator and maintain your relationship with Him. Prayer, scripture reading, meditation, and worship. All will give you an inner peace that without anxieties arise, you start relying on yourself and stressing yourself out, and none of those things are good for learning. All right, I think that was the last slide. Yeah, go succeed. This is a good picture too because you're not really mountain climbing necessarily, although if you go on field study, you do that. But it takes effort to get to the top. Don't think you're just going to arrive there because you're showing up to class. Put the effort in, put the time in. I think we used to have, is it 2 hours? I think it's 2 hours of study time for each hour you spend in class. And most students don't even come anywhere close to that. They might have 15 minutes or, So be sure to spend time and do the work. Does anyone have any questions?
How do you use like science books are so hard to read? How do you recommend?
Break it up in chunks. Don't try and read, set aside 2 hours and just read science books straight through. Break it up in smaller pieces and make sure you're understanding the vocabulary. Because there's often vocabulary that's unfamiliar. Those are what's this word mean?
Add something that you talked about reviewing after class. It's really been proven if you take the time to rewrite your notes, reorganize them while you read, take notes,
Yes.
and then match them up with your class notes. But don't just go home and read over those notes. If you want long-term retention, and that's what you need in your majors, you need to take the time to rewrite those notes in a different format, whether it's putting them on the note cards, if it's using a system called the Cornell note-taking. I can explain that to you if you don't know what that is. But just organize them so they're nice and neat and make a good study tool for yourself. But taking the time to do that gets them into more into your memory.
And I mentioned neatness of notes. Organization is huge.
Organize
Yeah, it really is. I was not always the neatest person, but I did find when I took the time to do that, it made a huge difference. Other questions?
Just a suggestion, one thing I've done is I'm not distracted in class, is I don't bring my laptop. And I do all my notes handwritten and then I go home and type them.
Perfect.
So that way I don't have to have my laptop and that way I'm going through and doing the note taking twice so that it's all there.
That's good. That's good. Any other suggestions that you have? Things that study strategies you found that work? Well, thanks again for showing up. I appreciate it.